Today we're going to be talking about contact processes in Infor CRM. And just like I start out my sales processes webinar, contact processes are not sales processes. A contact process is created and ran against one contact or many contacts, and that's it. Whereas a sales process is ran against an opportunity. So you want to make sure you know which one you're creating when you're creating it. So today we'll be talking about contact processes. I've opened up my web browser here to my Infor CRM. I'm on version 8.3. And if I scroll down to the bottom of a contact screen, you'll see here that I do have a Processes tab. And in that Processes tab on this one, it shows that there is one process that has been assigned to contact John Abbott. In here, we also have a suspended checkbox. There's really not a way to edit these within the web client. You can assign them and you can see them here. And we assign them by just clicking on this plus sign. And I can schedule it for John Abbott and then choose my process from here. And in this case, I'm logged in as administrator, so I would be the process owner. But you can switch who the process owner is also. Probably would either be, the account manager would be the process owner. And I'll explain that to you when we're actually creating a process. So once we scheduled it here, it would show up underneath the Processes tab and it would run. Now, where you can choose to suspend or abort it or move it to the next step is within the LAN client. So they haven't brought those features over here yet. But if I go over here, I want to open up my server and open up the LAN client. In my LAN client, we again have a Processes tab on the contact record. And in here, if I right-click on the process here, you can see where I can change the status and either suspend it or abort it if I want. I can also scan this process now, scan all processes, or trigger it to the next task. Now, the triggering I usually use when I'm trying to test a process. I could call it kicking it to the next step. So when we build a process, we may have time lapses built within that process that we may want to go in and just trigger the next task now so we can see how the process is running. So with that being said, let's look at how to actually create a process and then we can look at how assigning it here. So back in my architect, not the application architect, but the regular architect, I've opened up my architect here, and I'll close this. And if I go to File, New Plugin, and I have a choice here for Contact Process. When that contact process opens, I also have a little task box over on the right-hand side showing me all the different things that I can put within my contact process. So if we look at those tasks for a minute, let me stretch those out a little bit more. We have activities in one tab there where we can schedule a meeting, a phone call, a to-do, or just create a note. Under the output, we have outputting of documents, a mail merge, an email, a fax, which of course we don't use too much anymore, or a literature request. Under the decision tab, we have a question. We can ask a question and supply responses within the process, a dialog box, an ESP or event selection process. So based on something happening in the database, some other event happens. Or the stop. When we get to the end of a process, we can just put the stop in there. Lastly, we have plugin. In the plugin, we have DB change. So we can actually change the value in the database based on something happening within the contact process. I almost said sales process myself. We can open a data view. We can do a sub-process, so we can link many processes together if we want. So my recommendation, if you're starting to build processes, is build small ones. We can always link them together using this sub-process once we know each of those small ones work properly. We also have report here, where we can run a report. and lastly, run a script, which of course the programmer would have to script for you. So let's go back here first of all to the start process. That's where it all started out. And we're going to create a process here of a drip campaign where we're going to call an individual a couple different times, and we can also send out mail or send out letters in between time. So the first thing we want to do is create a phone call. So I'm going to take that phone call, drag it over right on top of the stop and go light there, and drop it. Then I can just double click on that phone call and it opens up the define task box. So the task name is phone call. I'm going to call it initial phone call. And it gives me a limited amount of space there. I'm just going to put in initial call regarding new phone call. And then in the notes I can put in call to determine if they are a good prospect. Now, schedule the call for. Remember when I looked at assigning that process, we could have it for the process owner, user who assigns the process, user who scans the process, or pick a user. So I'm going to say process owner because then if we assign the process to the account manager as the process owner, it would automatically schedule this for the account manager. So I'll leave that as process owner. Time lapse, we have no time lapse right away. We want this to happen right away as soon as we schedule this process. And I'm going to automatically schedule it. I'm not going to prompt the user. They don't have to do anything. I'm just going to automatically put it on that account manager's schedule of activities. When are we going to schedule it for? No days after it's triggered, just right away. Start time, we won't put a start time in there. We'll just leave it as a timeless activity. We can set a category with it here, cold call. And scheduling conflict, I want it to schedule anyway. So I'm just going to say OK. So it's going to schedule that first call. As soon as we assign the process, it's going to schedule the call right away. So after the salesperson makes that phone call, I think we'll ask them a question and see where this is going to from there. So I'm going to put under the decision, I'm going to grab question here and drag that on top of phone call. We'll double click on that question. And task name is question, that's fine. In the activity notes, I'm going to put in, is this person interested? In other words, interested in our products. I'm going to copy that right down into the question. That's going to be the question that we see. And again, no time lapse here. I want this to happen right away as soon as I finish that phone call to ask this question. Is that person interested or not? So we'll say OK there. No, they're not interested at all. We're just going to mark the status as closed on this contact. So I'm going to go to plugin and choose the DB change, drag that on top of the question, and drop it. Double click on that. And in the bottom left-hand corner, first of all, let's answer the question. I'm going to say, not interested. Change status to closed. So when we answer the question, that'll be the answer we're choosing, and we see exactly what it's going to do. Now, over on the right here, I'm going to just click on any field, and I'm going to hit my S key on my keyboard until I continue hitting S until I find my status field. Then I'm going to double click on status. You see it shows up bold there. So what's my new value going to be? I'm just going to put in closed. So of course you would put that in conjunction with whatever values you're using in your contact status pick list. Okay, display ready for execution dialog box. No, again, that would require user interaction. I don't care about that. And then don't wait for the task to complete. We're just going to move on to the next task. So we've answered the question. We put in the new value in the database. I'm just going to say OK. Now on that line of reasoning, we can put a stop on that one. So after that database change, it's done. The whole process is done right there. Now, if they're somewhat interested, so let's go back to our output here. If they're somewhat interested, maybe we need to send them some more literature. So I'm going to take this literature request and drag this all the way back to the question mark, not to the database, but to the question mark so it branches out. And now I have literature request. So I'll double click on that literature request. It's a new literature request. We can leave it there. Again, I'm going to automatically schedule it. Don't prompt the user. I can choose my cover letter here from the templates I have existing out there. I can set a priority with that, just like we can do with a literature request. How are we going to send that? And how am I going to print that literature list with the cover letter on a separate page? Only the attachment list or only the cover letter? I'm going to say on a separate page there. Then over on the right, we can choose what we're actually going to send for literature. Under company, I'll choose company overview and put a 1 in there, one of those. And in the handouts, I'll also choose a pen and pencil set and put a 1 in there. So just to give them some more information about our company. And then I'm just going to click on OK there. Okay, so following that line of reasoning, we asked them, they're somewhat interested. We're going to send them that literature request. And then after that, I do want to call them back again. So under activities, I'm going to grab phone call, and I'm going to put it right on literature request to go out in that line. Now I'll double click on that. And I'm going to put in my notes for this call, follow up on literature sent last week. And I'm going to put a time lapse. So instead of putting the time lapse up here where it says time lapse and I can choose it, if I choose that there, it's not going to put it on my calendar until that time lapse is up. Down here I can choose schedule it 7 days after triggering. So it'll put it on my calendar right away, but it's just going to put it 7 days out. That way I can see it right away. So that's what I'm going to use for my time lapse. And I'll say automatically schedule, do not prompt the user. Category, follow-up. I can put an alarm on it. Again, we'll assign it to that process owner. And let me see, did I forget anything there? That should be it. We don't have answer question here because it's not on the question mark anymore. It's following the literature request. I'll just say OK there. So on that one, we'll have the literature request that gets sent, follow up a week later with a phone call, and then we could have it do another sub-process or whatever. For this one, I'm just going to say, OK, and we'll end that line of questioning there. Where's my stop here? And I'll put a stop on that line. So we've got no, they're not interested, they may be interested, and the third choice is they are interested. So if they're interested, we want to schedule a presentation meeting. So drag meeting back to question mark there, double click on the meeting. I'll put in presentation, set up presentation meeting. Make sure you answer the question in the bottom left corner. Yes, schedule presentation meeting. Okay, and this one we'll choose a start time. I'll just click start there. And I'm not going to say automatically schedule, so it's going to stop and ask the user when they want to schedule that meeting for, because obviously they have to check their schedule when they can actually go to that meeting. And again, process owner it's going to be scheduled for, which our process owner, remember, will be the account manager. Set a category again. In here I'll put sales visit. Remember, our categories are used for reporting purposes, so that's why I always choose one there. And that will be right away after you answer the question yes. And we answer the question right, yep, there it is. So we can click on OK there, and we'll schedule a presentation meeting. And that will be our end of our questioning on that line. So I'll put a stop there. So we've got our 3 different scenarios there where once we initially call them, they're either interested, somewhat interested, or not interested at all. What do we call that? Prospect qualification into the lead track family. Copy that down into display name. Say OK. There we go. And then we also want to release that. So I went it to the little plugin up on the top here with the release. And I'm going to click on everyone and say OK. Hit F5 there just to refresh it. Now I can go back and look. I can look right here in my LAN client. I'm on a contact record already. I'm on processes here. I can go up to schedule process under lead track. And we have our process qualification. Everyone, I also have the process qualification administrator private. That's because I created it, so I see the private one, and then I also see where I've released it. So I'm going to release it only to the current contact, but you can see there where we could release this to a group of contacts if we had a whole list of people we just got from a trade show or something, or we could release it to, not release it to, but schedule it to a specific group here, and it would show all of our contact groups. Now for the current contact, remember we wanted to do it for Lee Hogan. I'm not going to do that because I want to see what it's doing here, but normally we would change the process owner then to the account manager. I'm going to go ahead and click. We can also preview it here. If you look at the preview, it shows you what we just got done building. I'm going to go ahead and assign it. You see that it gets assigned down in the bottom here, prospect qualification. If I scan that process and look under my activities, you'll see that our first phone call from that process has been scheduled. So if we open that call, or I'm going to choose complete activity. So here it is, call to determine if they're a good prospect. So we'd have our phone conversation and we would complete the call. So we'd put any notes in here that we had. I'm going to say OK to complete the call. And here are our answers to our question. Now it looks like we might not have put in our second answers. We'll have to go back and check that. But I'm going to say, for this one, I'll say not interested. Remember, if they're not interested, it's supposed to change their status up here. Right now, I can barely see it, but it says inactive. It's supposed to change that to close. So I'm going to say OK. We'll pull this down a little bit. Let's hit F5. And you see there the status has changed to closed, and it has actually completed that leg of that process. Let me go back to my process here for a second. Let's look at our second answer lit request here. Open that again. Answer question. We didn't put an answer there, so I'm going to put somewhat interested. Interested. Schedule lit request. And say OK. So I want to make sure to save that again. Go in and make sure it's released to everyone. I'll hit F5 there. Go back to my contact record again. And let's schedule that process again against the same test record. So I'm going to go schedule, process, lead track, personal qualification, current contact, and assign it. So there it is under our processes. The activities, there's our activity. So if we go to complete that, we'll say OK. There's our second answer, somewhat interested. Say OK. And then it should schedule a literature request, which it did. Now, we'll do that one more time for our testing purposes. I'll go back and, because it scheduled the lit request, so after that lit request was completed, it would still schedule a phone call in that line and then be done. We'll schedule it again here and choose the lead track again, assign the process. Here's our activity under activity, so I'll complete that. And this time we're going to say, yes, they are interested. So I'm going to say, OK. Yes, schedule the presentation meeting. Ask me who I want to schedule it with. Remember, we told it to pop up the box for us. And then we can choose our date for the meeting. And we could set a time. I've got it set at 9 a.m. We could alarm it here for whenever. Put any extra notes we have in there. Click on OK, and that would complete that. So that activity is scheduled, but it actually completes the process at that point. So we went through all three different branches of our contact process. We didn't go to the phone call level of this lit request. We stopped right here at the lit request. But we see that it's running the way we want it to. So now we could assign that process to any contacts we want. If we want to do that in the web client, if I go back here, I do have my web client open here. I'm on John Abbott, and I can just go to my plus sign under the Processes tab and schedule it for John Abbott. And here's our prospect qualification. And there's where we could switch the process owner to the account manager. And we just click on Schedule. So my thought behind all these is, again, go in and create small processes, and we can use that sub-process linkage under plugin there to link several processes together to get a huge process later on down the road. But start out easy, map it out first, and then come in here and build it, assign it, make sure you test all different scenarios on a test record that you have, and then go ahead and unleash it. I wouldn't unleash it to a huge group at first, just unleash it to a few contacts and see how it works out. If it doesn't work, you can tweak it a little bit. If it works fine, you can increase the size of the recipient list when you schedule it the next time. If you've got any other questions on contact processes, certainly let us know. We'd be happy to answer them. Also, if you have any recommendations for any other webinars, we'd like to hear those. I want to thank you all for joining me this afternoon, and have a great day.